We are back.
I don't know about you guys, but that dancing really took it out of me and Guaps.
It looks like you were dancing.
Not handle that. So.
Yeah, looks like you were dancing hard. I was too, clearly. Oh man, they are awesome. Yeah, thank you to our wonderful Zumba dancers for putting that together for us. It was so much fun. It is time again for another one of our campus partners to join us, and we are just so thrilled. So next up, we have Dr. Heather Batchelor, a professor in the Master of Education program. So I'm going to bring her in right now. Welcome, Heather.
Hi, how are you both?
Doing very well.
Doing really well. How are you?
Great. It's so good to be here with you. I imagine you're tired from doing this all day.
It's been a long day, but it's been very invigorating. It's very exciting. So I'm feeling pretty energized.
That's awesome.
So Heather, I wanted to offer something very quick because I've got an eye on all of our donations and such going on here. And we're very, very close to our 1,000, gift goal. There are a lot of programs very similar to this one where we're waiting on just a few more to reach the program goal. So we need about 13 more gifts for the program that you're going to be discussing. And I've got a small ask for everybody who's watching right now, and it's give $25. And for the next 13 $25 donations, I will match every single one, and we'll just crush this one. We'll get over our 1,000 goals. We'll nail it for this program. And Heather's going to tell us why that's going to be such a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm. We are pretty humbled and inspired by the outpouring of support, especially for our new MED, Trauma, Resilience, and Restorative Justice track. And it's great to see community members donating, even better to see our alumni donating. A lot of our great folks are out in the field and they're teachers, and we know they don't make a lot. And so we really appreciate just even the small gifts that are coming in from those folks. Because this is such important work that we're doing. We really think it's going to make a difference long-term to the youth and the communities that we serve. So please, 13 more, that's all we need. Keep giving.
Well, while we have you here and while we're waiting for those 13 to come in, can you just tell us about these new programs in trauma, resilience, and restorative justice? And what are these programs and why are we fundraising for them today?
So I am so excited about these new programs, or this new program. It is sort of the culmination of all the work that I think I've done in my career. I started out as a classroom teacher in middle school and then moved to high school. And I worked often with the kids who really struggled the most to fit in with school, to meet the behavioral expectations of school. And what I realized over the course of my years in the classroom was really it was schools needed to change, right? And we needed to do something different to help these kids be successful. And when there was such magic that when we did these changes, these kids really excelled and they got to be their true selves and they got to go on to have really wonderful life outcomes. And so the new programs really focus on the ways that teachers and schools and administrators can structure schools to help kids be successful in really meaningful ways. And so the trauma portion really focuses on the ways in which developmental trauma and life trauma impacts the brain development of youth. And then we focus on resilience, on how once we sort of make the interventions that we do in schools, that kids then can become resilient. And then the restorative justice piece is really a life skill and thinking about the ways that we resolve conflict in productive and healthy ways so that we go on to have great relationships and excel in our work environments and all of those great things.
And what can you tell us about where the idea of this program came from and adding it to our curriculum here at Westminster?
It really came out of a culmination of my work experience. And then I started doing a lot of research into the area because when I was doing some of this work, we didn't have the language and the vocabulary and some of the research that we have now, right? It was just, the teacher out there on their own thinking about ways to engage kids. And so the research in recent years has really come to fruition that gives us really good, credible data on how the practices of teachers can impact this. And I started building classes. So I started with a childhood trauma class called Hope and Resilience, Childhood Trauma with our undergraduate students. I added a restorative justice class. I added a juvenile justice class. And from that sprung the opportunities for us to create an MED track with this focus. So it's for teachers who have are out in the field and practicing. It's for folks who might be working with youth in different contexts, people who work with the houseless populations, or just people who've experienced trauma in general. And so we kind of created a program that can serve all of those constituents.
That's so cool. Yeah. So it seemed like these classes were just sort of coming about organically, and then soon enough, you've got a whole program's worth of curriculum. That's great.
So that kind of actually, interestingly enough, I feel like that ties in a little bit to what we were talking about with Tamara just before we started speaking with you, which is oftentimes in higher education, I imagine the case is very much the same for K through 12, et cetera. We're focusing a lot of our energy and our time on the students who are maybe are provided a little bit too much, and we could really be helping populations that are struggling and maybe are experiencing trauma and circumstances along those lines that have had a severe impact on them. Can you outline for the people who are watching right now what developmental challenges can arrive as a result of the trauma one experiences either in their younger years or as they're older, et cetera?
Yeah, we talk a lot in the program about developmental trauma, which is trauma that happens between birth and about 3-4 years old, and how it can actually change the neurodevelopment of the brain. Our brain is pretty flexible, and we at that age have a lot of neural pathways that have been yet to be developed. And what we find is kids that have experienced trauma, which is when things that should happen don't happen and things that shouldn't happen do happen. What part of the brain gets overdeveloped is that reptilian part of your brain that controls fight or flight. And when that happens, you often get into an accelerated fight or flight state all the time. You become hyper aroused. You may misperceive threats all around you because your brain has been developed to try to keep you safe. And so the other part of the brain that doesn't get as developed is the neocortex, which is the part of the brain that's really responsible for impulse control, for executive functioning, for thinking about long-term consequences. And so when you have that disparity in development, it makes it really difficult for you to be successful in school. And so what trauma-informed practices do is it helps students develop some of those neural pathways, because the wonderful thing about the brain is it is flexible, right? You can rebuild pathways that have not been built before.
It sounds to me like there's a lot of benefit to being able to assist individuals who have experienced trauma at a younger age, and that being able to intervene earlier in life also has a tremendous impact in the long-term success of that individual, and then collectively, I would assume, our society. So is that, I imagine that's an element of what you look to incorporate in these teachings and in these types of programs. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you directly engage and impact those who've experienced trauma and what kind of benefits this provides?
This is absolutely a social justice issue, right? When we think about this work, I think it really intersects well with diversity, equity, and inclusion work, because more often than not, the kids that are impacted by developmental trauma are the ones that are getting suspended and expelled from school and excluded from classrooms on a regular basis. And so this work really works to call kids in rather than push them out. Because when we push them out, what we see increased dropout rates, increased interaction with the juvenile justice system. We know that when kids drop out and don't get a diploma, they're more likely to be incarcerated as an adult. And so this work really works to try to end some of those cycles of trauma that push kids into these other institutions.
So what uniquely qualifies Westminster students and specifically the graduate students to help to kind of change what we've been seeing historically, and have a paradigm shift here and actually engage and make this positive impact early on? What makes Westminster unique? Why has this program been successful to this point, and how will it continue to succeed?
Well, one thing that I think is true of all of our education programs at Westminster is that we see the teachers and the students that we have as leaders in the field, right? So they might be future leaders, they might already be leaders. And so we really work to cultivate that leadership capacity in them. And we push them to think structurally. So not just to think about what they can do themselves in their own classroom, but how they really speak to the institutions that they work with and push for change within those institutions. So it is something that we cultivate regularly in the School of Education. And, you know, I think maybe I'm biased. I think we attract some of the best and brightest teachers and future teachers out there. So they come to us already ready for this work.
So I'd love to hear, in relation to these new programs and just in general, what about Westminster School of Education really uniquely positions graduates to make a difference in their field? And essentially, like, what's special about Westminster School of Education?
You know, I think the level of involvement that students have with faculty is incredibly important. And we have faculty who have taught in the classroom and understand complicated school contexts. So we start with that as a platform. But then we also push our students to really engage with the work. We have all sorts of placements that students do in school. They do an intensive student teaching program where they're out in the field and doing work there, and they're bringing back the questions that they have in that work to the classrooms. And then really in every single class that we have, we push students to think about real life applications in their jobs and in their work of the material that we're doing. We don't just operate in theory, but we think about theory to practice in a really meaningful and authentic way.
And I know that many Westminster alum teachers have had some pretty great honors recently and had their teaching work recognized. So I think that is really reflected out in the community, and our graduates are out there really, you know, making us proud.
Yeah, shout out to John Arthur, who is a candidate for the National Teacher of the Year. We're so proud of him.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. I'm also curious to hear what excites you most when you think about the future of this new program that's being developed and the School of Education.
Well, you know, first and foremost, what excites me are the students that are coming through the program. I see in them the future, you know, the future of schools that are going to change, the future of community organizations that are going to change. I have students who are in public health. I have students who are in business, and I get so excited about thinking about how in their individual context, they're going to make change, and they're going to bring about what I hope is a revolution in how we design schools and how we design policies and address structures in this country. So that first and foremost is the thing that really excites me about it. We also have a couple of new ideas that some of this funding is going to help fuel, and I'm super excited about it. The first is we have a course in development right now that will bring students out into area prison facilities to work tutoring people who are incarcerated. And I'm really excited about that because, again, that's that notion of putting theory into practice. We also have another course that is really in the very pre-development stages that would potentially work with youth who are involved in the juvenile justice system and bring them to campus for a course where they work with Westminster students concurrently in that course, thinking about the ways in which they can make change in their communities, designing a plan, and then sort of engaging in that project to bring that change about.
All right. I mean, I'm kind of convinced. I love this for so many reasons. The first of which is that we all who are watching this and donating now have the opportunity to impact the educations of Westminster students who are going on to actually impact their communities firsthand, both directly in this program and in their careers moving forward. And the impact that they will have in their community is breaking a lot of tragic cycles that we tend to see in our society, giving people more of a chance, whether those are people who are incarcerated, as you just outlined, or whether those are, you know, young minds who are blossoming and growing and experiencing trauma. This, to me, as many of these other programs, it seems like a clear-cut opportunity to not just make an impact in the lives of Westminster students, but to impact our own communities. And so I'm very excited about it. I just want to point out that we've had a few donations come in from Melanie and Tyler and Cecilia, and I'm going to match every one of them. And we're looking for just a few more here, people. So, if you can just part with $25 to help make an impact on, Westminster students' educations and our communities and vulnerable populations, like this to me seems like one of the most empathetic, areas where we can really make an impact.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important piece of this program, right? This just isn't just about our students, right? This is about our community and how we interact. And I think the work that our students are doing has this amazing ripple effect. I think about every teacher that comes through our program. They're out there working with hundreds of students a year. And I think we really have the opportunity to create a lot of change in our classrooms and in our communities because of the work that folks that are coming through our programs are doing.
That has been such an incredible through line that I've heard all day from our campus partners. Everyone really just comes back to, yes, like these initiatives, of course, support students directly in these programs, but then there's such a ripple effect. Everything leads to a huge community impact. And I think that's amazing.
Well, and what is Westminster if not an institution that hopefully crafts individuals who want to make a positive impact in the world, right? At least as an alum, that was really truly the greatest takeaway I had at Westminster College. And when I hear about these programs, it's very affirming, the belief that Westminster truly does create people who are interested in improving the world that they live in. And I really don't understand if there's like a greater cause out there. So in my mind, this is perfect.
And it doesn't matter what your major is. It doesn't matter what your background is, right? You have the power and the capacity to make that change. And I think that's something we want all of our students to walk away with.
So another thought that I have had since learning about this program, and I think it's just so fascinating, is I'm wondering how in the development of this curriculum, but also in just the way that the School of Education has been running, how have the events of the past year affected how you're thinking about this programming? Because I know that the word trauma comes up a lot in various contexts of, that we're undergoing a collective trauma. And that there are events happening that people may not have thought of as traumatic, but they can, reflect on us in that way. How's that affected how this program has come together?
I think now more than ever, this is a time when we need this kind of work happening, right? We have experienced a collective trauma. We know that youth who have experienced developmental trauma are experiencing this in even more significant ways because it is layers and layers and layers of trauma, right? And of experiences that have caused trauma. And so even if you're a student who this is the first time you are experiencing trauma, the strategies that we teach and the structures that we work on creating in our classrooms make it better for all students, right? Because we can't just sort of sweep this under the rug. I work with teachers a lot, and one of the things that everybody's saying is like, oh, well, when we're back to school, everything's going to be better. When we're back to school, we are still going to be carrying this baggage from this year, right? And so we've got to help kids unpack that baggage. We've got to think about ways that we help them get regulated, how we help them relearn routines and get back to the place where they are mentally ready to learn. Because if you're experiencing trauma and you're kind of in that fight or flight brain, you're not ready to learn. It doesn't matter how good the curriculum is. You've got to help kids get to that place where first they're regulated before they can even get to that place where they can learn.
Yeah, it sounds like this work could not come at a better time, truly. I also want to share just real quick in our comments, I'll put it up on the screen. This is from Hannah. Just a shout out for Heather's juvenile justice course last year. Yeah, Heather and the whole School of Ed are doing really important work.
Thanks, Hannah. It was so great to have you in that class. And that class happened right when COVID hit. We were halfway through the semester. And we all had to juggle right in the middle of that semester. And we had the earthquake, and then we had a snow day. It was a semester.
It was indeed.
Yeah. Speaking of trauma, no, I think that something that's super interesting about this, and this is another call to action that I'm going to throw out there, which is on theme. I think that while there is a spectrum with trauma, like everyone can relate and identify moments in time where they've had traumatic experiences. It is to be human, right? But I think that another unique opportunity that seems quintessentially Westminster is, I don't encourage anybody to list names necessarily, but donate in the name of someone who you know has experienced some kind of trauma in their life, or perhaps recently in this very tumultuous past, year. I think this is a great opportunity for us to just kind of look inward and say, this is something that we want to try and address at a young age and instill the appropriate values in people as we move forward, because it's beneficial to all of us as a species and to us as a community. So, my call out is, I'm going to donate in honor of someone who I know has experienced trauma in their lifetime, who has shared that information with me, and I would encourage people watching to do the same.
I'm going to jump on that and say also donating in honor of an educator, because educators have had, are always doing incredible work. And this past year has been, I feel like there are few jobs that have really risen to the occasion as much as in education. So I'm definitely thinking in honor of educators that I know, supporting this amazing work that's happening. We're at 91 gifts of our goal of 100. We're getting so close, so keep them coming.
And I'm going to add, if you're an educator, donate in honor of a student that you have that's having a hard time, right? That could really benefit from this kind of work and this kind of these kind of strategies to help them get on a track that's going to lead to success.
Look at how many people this is impacting already, right? Shianne, to your point as well, I think about many of my close friends who have gone on to be educators and the challenges that they faced this year. And of course, the students who have experienced different challenges, not just as a result of the pandemic, but may have, had certain challenges and traumas exacerbated by the pandemic. This is something that impacts so many people so deeply.
Well, when I think about if we had this in place ahead of time, if we had been teaching the students the skills that they need for self-awareness, self-regulation, and resilience before the pandemic hit, we'd have a lot less issues right now. And I think that's really important sort of to consider, right? That we should have been teaching it, but now that we have the opportunities to be teaching it, we really need to jump on this, because this is not going to be the last national crisis we have.
Absolutely. Yeah. No time like the present. Well, I just want to put out, if there's anything else that you want to share with people about the School of Education, about these new programs, as we are, we're past the halfway point. So I'll say we're winding down the day. And in case anyone missed it, we did hit that 1,000 plus donation goal, which we are so excited about, but we've still got individual programs that still need that last little push to reach their goals. So keep them coming. But yeah, if there's anything else that you want to share to our audience.
Yeah, I think I'll just end with, you're not going to find a harder working faculty and a faculty more dedicated to their students and to really promoting social justice outcomes in schools. And so, I love that we've had so many alumni and so many college supporters donate to this. Know that every penny that comes in we're going to make the best use of that to push that out into the community to be making change in our community. So thank you to everybody that's donated. I don't know how many more we need. Help us get to that 100 donation goal.
Yeah, it looks like we're at 9 away right now, unless another one has just come in. So we're getting there, and hopefully in the next hour we'll hit that goal and be able to celebrate that. I also think that once we do hit that goal, we've got a fun TikTok dance, as has been the theme from Peggy Kane, that we'll get to share when we reach that goal. So if that inspires anyone to throw in a couple extra bucks, please do.
It is worth seeing, let me tell you.
Well, thank you so much, Heather, for joining us and for sharing about your program today. We talked early this morning when we were talking with President Jobkin about you can't choose a favorite child when it comes to all of our fundraising initiatives. But ever since I heard about this, I've just been so fascinated, I think, by the idea, even though I don't have an education background other than being educated, but I've just been so fascinated by the idea of this program, trauma, resilience, and restorative justice. And that, like, even just hearing about it has really been like a paradigm shift for me in terms of thinking about what education is. So I'm so appreciative.
Oh, thanks. And thanks to really the entire Westminster community for pushing this to the forefront on One Westminster Day.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Trey, I don't know if you had anything else, but we'll wrap up, and then we actually have another guest here with us in just a moment. So thanks so much, Heather.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
The rest of the night.
Yeah.